Good evening, I'm Edel Howlin. Welcome to Red, White and Blue. He has served as our United States Congressman for 24 years, following 2 decades in the Texas House of Representatives and the Texas Senate. In 1996, he was appointed to the U.S. House Energy and Commerce Committee, which he still serves on today. Since being elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, he has been an advocate of energy, education and health issues. In fact, he helped write and amend the Affordable Care Act of 2010. Please join me in welcoming hometown Congressman Gene Green. And of course, welcome our host tonight, David Jones and Gary Paulin.
And of course, if he voted to support and amend the Affordable Care Act, that must mean he's friends with Nancy Pelosi, is my guess.
I hope not.
But what was missed in the introduction, Gary, was that the Energy and Commerce Committee is one of 4 special committees that the Democrats have that are exclusive, meaning that you put all your work into that committee and none
it's a
others.
very important committee.
Right,
No question.
and of course now we have the health care bill that you were, I guess, in opposition to. Can you tell us what is it going to take for that bill to become law of the land? What's the procedure for getting it there?
Well, first of all, our committee had a 27-hour markup. We kept the committee in session for 27 hours. Of course, it was all party line votes. We were trying to improve what the Republican bill did. It didn't, and that's the one that went to the floor that they couldn't get the Republican votes for, so they pulled the bill. But this last week, they had a bill on the floor that they got enough votes. I think we got 20 votes from Republicans on the House floor and all Democrats, so it barely passed the House, so it goes to the Senate. And the Senate is much more independent than House members, I think, so, and at least they verbally say they are. So we'll see what the Senate does with it, but for a district like I represent, it's devastating because I have 20,000 of my constituents on the Affordable Care Act. Most of them afford the premiums because of the subsidies that will go away with that bill if it passes the Senate and signed by the President. Texas didn't expand Medicaid, but in my district, in urban Houston, I would have had 46,000 of my people least qualify for Medicaid. It's not the best coverage, but it's better than having nothing. People walking into Ben Taub or LBJ without any insurance, and that happens every day now. So there's things we could do, although the bill that came out of the House last week, there were political compromises on the Republican side. They decided that the pre-existing condition, which was in the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies can't deny you coverage. They have to issue you a policy that's reasonable, you can afford. Before that, if you were 52 years old and had diabetes, your premiums, you couldn't afford them. And so that's what Affordable Care Act did in 2009 and 10, changed that. Now, there is no bill that's ever passed by the legislature and Congress that's perfect. We should have fixed it over the last 7 years. But since the Democrats lost the House and the Senate in 2010, and it's been a majority Republican, all we did was vote to repeal it. Now the Republicans have both the House, the Senate, and the President, and they realize, as the President, quote President Trump, that says, health care is hard, and it is hard. Because
unless you live in Australia, where he says it's perfect.
That's right, and Australia has a government run, and I'm glad the President complimented the Prime Minister of Australia.
Yeah, right.
President still is in a learning process.
Well, and I think that is fair. Do you think some of the ideas that you put forth may come out of this Republican Senate?
Well, I'm hoping that it'll be more reasonable. I work bipartisanly. I work on health care, I work on energy, I work on environment bipartisanly, and we've got some really successes on that. But typically health care in 2010 was very partisan. We didn't get one Republican vote on the Affordable Care Act, and they didn't get one vote on the bill that they passed last week. But somewhere along the way, we need to sit down and work together. And the Senate, with only 100 members instead of 435, maybe we'll do that. But we'll see what happens.
So who are the losers in this House bill?
Oh, it was the senior citizens. For one thing, if you're so many people work until they're 52, 55 years old, they wait till they can get Medicare. So they have to have some type of insurance. And the bill that the House passed would allow those near senior citizens, 55-year-olds, to pay 5 times as much as a 22-year-old. Now, that may make actuarial sense, but you can't afford it when you're 55 and on a retirement income. So that's what the Affordable Care Act. Insurance is spreading the risk. The young invincibles, as we call them, need to have insurance. That's why we had the individual mandate, the employer mandate. And So you can all afford it. It's auto insurance the same way. Not all of us are going to go out today and have an auto accident, but somebody will, and our insurance premiums pays for that, so they can pay when need. So insurance is spreading the risk. We spread it from the young people to the adults, and the Medicare, you get Medicare.
So are the hospitals happy?
Oh, the hospitals, this is interesting for a Democrat.
It's all about the money.
The American Hospital Association, the American Medical Association opposed the Republican bill because they know that what you're going to do is put a lot of folks outside of the insurance system. And in Texas, since we didn't expand Medicaid, like I said, 46,000 of my constituents would have had some type of coverage to go into the hospital with. So they will have people show up, and by federal law, a hospital emergency room has to treat them and stabilize them, and then they transfer them somewhere to typically to a public hospital system.
Well, and
like
that's what happens in Harris County. I mean, to be fair, it's not like these people aren't getting health care, or it's not getting paid for. It's getting paid for by the taxpayers of Harris County at this point. Well, so which you find to be not fair.
Yeah. Well, in the state, I think people ought to have skin in the game, and that's why the county judge supported expanding Medicaid in the state legislature, just because our taxpayers are paying for it, and we're getting folks from counties who don't have public hospital systems.
How many people believe what Congressman Labrador believed, who, when he said to a rally the other day, nobody dies because of lack of access to health care?
He's right.
That's just not true.
And he was booed.
That's just not true.
You just said it was in Harris County.
You know, people are not getting the coverage. If you are diabetic, you need to have your medication, you need to visit your doctor, you need to make sure. And if you don't have insurance and you don't even qualify for Medicaid, you're not going to have enough money to go in and pay that doctor cash. So people will die. And that's what's so frustrating about this. And I use an example. During World War II, we bombed the daylights out of everything in Europe and Japan. And all those countries after World War II created some type of public health care plan that would cover everybody. And yet our country, because of the history of World War II, because of price controls, businesses started offering health care. And so that's how, up until about 20 years ago, most of our constituents were covered by their employee health care. But then employers realized they didn't have to.
It also got more expensive.
Yeah, it got more expensive, and they didn't have to. So, and that's where we ended up with, a third of the people not having any kind of insurance. And of course, Medicaid's for poor people and seniors. But Medicaid is what the Republican bill will do is cut Medicaid because it'll transfer the authority back to the states. In the state of Texas right now, the federal government pays 2/3 of our Medicaid program. The state's supposed to come up with 1/3, but my state legislators tell me they don't even come up with 1/3. That's why they keep cutting reimbursement for doctors under Medicaid, and doctors don't want to take Medicaid patients because they don't get reimbursement for it. So Texas and states probably would not do it. So, but 2/3 of the people on Medicaid, 2/3 of the cost of Medicaid go to seniors for residential care. But 2/3 of the people served are children. So if the Republican bill passes on what they want to do with Medicaid, you can throw grandmother out of the nursing home, and your poor kids won't get immunizations. That's why it's so bad what the House did for health care.
Well, excuse me, David. One of the things you talked about in terms of pre-existing conditions, the Obama plan, what it did is encourage people to say, I'm healthy, I don't need to do insurance. I can wait, I'll pay whatever the fine of the tax, which get put off. And then when I get sick, I'll buy it. And that's the problem with the system, because what you said, skin in the game, was, well then, and that's, I think, where the whole idea of the mandate came from. If everybody pays, the system can work because it gets more balanced. But if you have that's the big problem.
Well, and you're right. And when we saw that, there's a penalty if you didn't buy health insurance, and there's employer mandate if you have 50 or more employees, but individually you had a mandate too. So what we should have done is increase that fee or that fine. But the other thing we did is because we wanted to cover more people, we kept extending the deadlines for you to sign up. And if you're 24 years old, and like you said, oh, I don't need to buy it right now, I'll wait until I need it. So they're putting it off, but they will have that motorcycle accident or get hit or have early onset of diabetes or something. So those are things we should have changed, but we couldn't because the Republican majority wouldn't let us fix it.
There's plenty of topics to cover, so let's close this with the politics of this issue, because there's a lot of enthusiasm on the Democratic side for taking out House Republicans. As you know, they have a majority by about 22, 23.
Yeah.
So you get 24 seats. You're in the majority. The Cook report has already said 20 are in danger of losing their seats, and there were 23 House members whose districts were carried by Hillary Clinton. So how enthusiastic are your colleagues about becoming in the majority?
Well, I think we're as enthusiastic as the Republicans were in 2010, and I hope that may happen, but you can't depend on it because elections are next year, and it depends. So, although, you know, in our history, and y'all are both political scientists, although we're all attorneys here, but there's always a buyer's remorse. In 1994, President Clinton lost the control of the House. In 2002, President Bush would have lost control except for 9/11 and
the war that he liked to have.
Yeah, and that didn't start till 2003. But anyway, and then what happened with President Obama in 10 is the same thing. You try and get things done, and there were some good things done, and then there's some buyer's remorse. I think you'll see the buyer's remorse when we come up to 2018.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's certainly a possibility, Congressman. But you have to be concerned that the Democratic activists remind you of just people who scream about everything. Everything is the end of the world, and it's not. And so Gorsuch, a battle the Democrats didn't need to make, but the activists wanted it, and they want you to fight on everything. And that's where the Democrats have a problem, because then they're going to say, well, you guys just oppose everything. You're just the party of no. What do you really stand for? And of course, we now learned this week that what we stand for is Hillary Clinton wants to run again in 2020. One more time to run for president to give the American people a chance to reject her.
I don't think I've seen that announcement.
First of all, I don't think she's going to run. I think she announced she wasn't, but be that as it may. But, you know, the Affordable Care Act's never been more popular than it is now. In fact, with the repeal effort over this year so far, the last 4 months, we've seen it goes up to 60% approval rating now. So that will be an issue in the Republican primaries and also be a Democrat primary.
And to finish the thought on the medical implications, we don't know what bill the Senate's going to come up with. It's not going to be what the House bill is. It's going to be different, and then they'll go to conference, and can they pass something or not? I don't know. That's a big mystery. But I want to talk to you about what has gone wrong in the Congress. You've been there 24 years. It has, as an institution, has changed a lot while you've been there. And I know that you had a history when you were in the Texas Senate and the Texas House of bipartisanship. You worked across the aisle. You got a lot done with Republicans and Democrats. And I think you tried to do that when you're in Washington, and now it sounds like it's virtually impossible.
Well, politics in D.C., and I think my state legislators tell me it's infiltrated the state house and the state senate now. But in Washington, it's so much easier just to fight instead of sit down and legislate. And on the Affordable Care Act, I worked with my Republican colleagues, and we got uncontested amendments on the Affordable Care Act back in 2009 when we were drafting it. This year, though, when we had the bill that they came out with, they would not work with us on any of the amendments, and that's why we ended up spending 27 hours voting amendments and all night. And believe me, it's not pleasant to go into your room and find all these old pizzas that are sitting there. But so we need to really come together. But in Washington, it's easier to say I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. And I tell people, I may have a solution for health care. Republicans may have one. But there's bound to be an American solution, and we need not to have what happened in 2009 when we didn't get a Republican vote, and we don't need what happened this year so far and not getting a Democratic vote.
Is there any leaders in either party that you think are ready to step up and say, you know, it's time to legislate and reduce partisanship when we're not running for office, which should not be 24/7, 365 days a year?
Well, there are, but both on the Republican side and not so much on the Democratic side, I don't think, because I come from Texas, you know, and we've worked across party lines. I work across party lines on energy and health care. Mike Burgess is the chair of our Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee. Mike and I have worked together over the years. I'm the senior Democrat, and there are things we work on, emergency care, things like that. In fact, last Congress, the House and the Senate passed a thing called 21st Century Cures. Worked on it for 3 years, bipartisanly, got over 2/3 vote out of the House, and the Senate actually took their own good time about it, and we passed it in lame duck. But the other thing is, even on environmental law, we passed a bill last Congress that reformed the Toxic Substance Control Act. And in my district, it's really important because I have chemical plants and people who live along those fence lines. We've tried for many years, it's a 1976 law, that we couldn't fix it. EPA couldn't use it, and we passed it by a bipartisan vote. And so we can do it. But on some things that are so political, like the health care, and we all go to our corners and hold our breath, and we need somebody who will work together. And so far, the Republicans didn't do it this time, and frankly, we didn't do it in '09 when we were doing it.
But you didn't say when I asked you about the politics of it all, you didn't say one way or another, and I didn't, pressure you on it about whether or not you thought the Democrats would be ready to regain a majority in the state of Texas in 2018.
I think our districts are so drawn now. Now, there is a court decision coming up sometime in July or August that are changing our lines, and I think the state house districts too, because in Texas we're fairly gerrymandered, and we were supposedly under the Voting Rights Act, and what the legislature did, and frankly even the court did in 13, was something they wouldn't have allowed me to do when I was a state legislator drawing districts. You can't take Nueces County, which is a majority Hispanic county, and submerge it with the suburbs of Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, because it goes up to Bastrop. And that's what the courts have identified. 3-judge panel in San Antonio is going to have a hearing July the 10th and start talking about changing the district lines for 18. And there may be more Democrats in Texas, Democratic districts.
Talking about the internal politics of the Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives, is Nancy Pelosi's last act as the leader of the party will be before she goes into a nursing home? I mean, is there not any younger leaders that we can put in place for the Democrats?
Nancy is so active, I don't think anybody in a nursing home would want her to be there because she's so active.
So maybe she'll go from politics
and
to
she will be in Houston over the next 2 weeks. She is just a dynamo. Now, we have philosophical differences. I come from Texas, and I have I work with energy because they employ a whole lot of my folks, whereas in San Francisco, they don't.
They use energy.
Yeah. So, but she has been a good leader. She's like most the Republican leaders, Democratic leaders, try and raise money, and she does very well at that. And we have literally, because of what happened over the last few months, huge numbers of people who are announcing they want to run for office. And we're seeing that turnout. I was in Washington when I watched the Women's March, and it wasn't only women, but it was so huge, and I saw the pictures here in Houston and Austin. There's something happening in our country, and people are going to be more activated, and that's good for democracy. So whether it's Republican or Democratic side, I just hope that we will see a better turnout. Hillary Clinton carried Harris County by over 100,000 votes, and I don't think that had happened. I know President Obama carried it in '08 pretty good, but in 12 he lost. He much closer. So I think Texas is changing.
I hate to rain on your parade a little bit, but the Democrats look to California. When in 1994 they had the referendum that was deemed to be anti-Hispanic, and they have yet to elect a statewide Republican since. Arizona, in the Show Me Your Papers law, was thought to be the time when Hispanics would get so fired up, and that would be the end of Republicans in Arizona, and yet the Republican governor was just reelected. And it took a decade, really, for the Californians to come up with a majority status. So the problem identified in the article which I'm citing said that the Democrats don't have the infrastructure that they have in California in terms of labor and organized activist groups that could support the momentum that you're hoping is coming forward.
Well, and that may be true because labor is stronger in California than it is in Texas, and Governor Wilson was the one who activated the Mexican-American community then by doing that. And here we have the legislature passing legislation right now for sanctuary cities and all this. Somewhere along the way, the Republican Party is going to go too far, in that sleeping giant, and it voted. The Hispanic population voted a lot more in last year's election, but still, there's still a lot of undervote. So, you know, if the legislature keeps doing things, we may have our own Governor Wilson in Texas.
Yeah, well, Abbott got almost a majority of the Hispanic vote when he ran 3 years ago. So
He wasn't running against a.
who's he running against this time? Nobody.
Well,
I can say you know
he's not. He's
going
not
anywhere.
at the top of the ticket. The
He will be.
senator is.
Okay, well,
Senator
Cruz,
is.
that's Hispanic. Neither of them are going anywhere.
Beto sounds like an Hispanic to me.
Yeah, but neither of them are going anywhere. It's not happening.
Rottinghouse, the
Professor
Rottinghouse over here at U of H had a poll, and it's significant, I think, because it says that 80% of the Latinos contacted in 2016 said they'd never been contacted by anybody about politics. So I don't know what the Democrats are doing to incorporate the Hispanics into a coalition, but that poll suggests that it hasn't happened yet.
Well, and whether it's urban Hispanics or the Rio Grande Valley or San Antonio or El Paso or anywhere rural areas, there's a lot of work to do, because typically the Mexican Americans are 75% Democrat if we can get them to the polls. And that's our job. You're right. The Democratic Party needs to get there.
Actually, you know, interesting. Dennis Prager, who I don't know if you ever listen to him. He's a talk show host, and he has something called Prager University, and he puts out like videos for this. And one of the video is why Hispanics should be, why belong as Republicans, because they fled from the kind of state domination that the Democratic Party stands for. It's actually quite fascinating. You ought to look it up. Maybe it'll convince you.
And I've heard that theory before, but and I represent a 77% predominantly Mexican American district. It's the family, your religious beliefs, and your job.
Right.
And that's what I think the Democratic Party ought to be about. And also in our district, now, you would think a Catholic district would be overwhelmingly pro-choice. Now, our Hispanic population is not that. I would probably not be in Congress if I was not pro-choice.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So, talking about the Hispanic community and the vote, there's also a lot of Hispanics actually in the Republican Party too. But I agree with you. This is going to be a Hispanic majority state.
But you can count them on both hands and both feet.
No.
Do you know this Congressman Conway, who is now head of the Intelligence Committee in the House?
Yeah. I work with Mike on. We're not on the same committee, but we're from Texas, and we don't have to have an interpreter to talk to each other.
Do you have an opinion about whether or not? General Flynn was a Russian stooge that was kept on the payroll by the White House for 18 days after they knew he had lied to them?
Well, I think the House and the Senate should create our committees on the Russian influence on the last election and what's going on right now.
In Europe.
Yeah, in Europe.
Yeah.
Whether it be in France, although the French elected a relatively moderate, the Netherlands before that, and of course Germany's having theirs, but I think there's a lot more that we don't know about. And I'm not on the Intelligence Committee or Armed Service, so they don't give me security clearances to find out those things.
But in answer to David, General Flynn worked for 18 days for the Trump administration. He worked for years for the Obama administration, and they didn't get rid of him.
They fired him.
Yeah, it took
You're wrong.
2
They
years.
fired him.
Yeah, it took 2 years.
You know, and then he
years,
goes to
Right.
Russia and he makes a speech and gets paid for it.
And actually, that would happen on the Democrats' watch. So
and that was after he was fired, I believe. But it doesn't matter. He was on the Russian payroll, as far as we know, until he was fired, because he wouldn't talk about it, and we don't know because it was classified
David,
information.
You can chase it all you want. There's
like I
nothing
said, the House and the Senate should come together and investigate the whole process. But you know, health care and jobs are still the main issue, and that's where I come from. You know, our economy is not doing as well as we should, although I see in the paper that the jobs are growing.
This is positive.
We need to get to the folks so they can have those skills, and that's what we try to do in our area to make sure that someone has a skill coming out of our high schools to where they can go to a community college, get a training, and go to work at one of the plants.
Let's hope that somebody's listening to Mr. Buffett, who said that tinkering around with the tax code has never promoted growth. You know, what's killing growth in the United States is health care, the cost of health care, the damage as a result of no health care. The people who are bankrupt because of health care has nothing to do with the tax code.
Yeah, he's wrong. Yeah, David's wrong as usual.
Well, he's a billionaire and you're not.
The one thing on Warren Buffett, I like him when he says you know, I shouldn't pay a lower tax rate than my person who manages my office.
Yeah,
and our tax code is wrong, and we need to look at it. But
Our tax code is a joke.
well, it's so confusing, and there's so many things in there. We need to go back and start it again.
Like from scratch.
What my colleague Kevin Brady, who's a good friend, we don't agree on this, but I think his bill would make it worse.
I'd like to see taxes on a postcard. How about you? I think that'd be pretty nice.
Now I do mine on TurboTax.
Yeah, it
That's
takes you
almost
hours.
like it.
It takes hours, doesn't it?
Thank goodness my wife does it.
Too much. Well, Congressman, it's been obviously it's always great to have you here. It's a fascinating conversation.
And Gary, I'm
David.
so sorry that so many of the issues went against you. You know, I mean, it's and you're still here smiling. I understand why. Given the
well, I like Gene. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
We don't agree on everything, but we actually agree on a lot. I mean, I think he's right on that. We need bipartisanship to come back.
and he may be in the majority soon.
Anything's possible, David. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Gene.
Congressman.
Thank y'all.
See you next week.